Hello everyone, I am Saravanan Tyagarajan. I am an Oracle Certified Master in 10G and 11G, and I am an Oracle consultant. I'm just I have just got a new thought about enabling the query rewrite function which we use in the materials view. Why can't we use it in our SQL statements to improve the performance of the database? What is query equivalence and why it is required? That's what we are going to look into it now. We have materials view query rewrite, so where we will run the actual query and Oracle internally uses the materials view to retrieve the output. So Oracle internally rewrites the query to use materials view instead of executing the actual SQL statement. Why query equivalence? Oracle profiles and baselines or even statistics modification in tune your query. We have several things like we give better statistics to the Oracle SQL statements in order to execute it fast and work properly without any deviations in the SQL statements. Uh, what about changing the query itself? No, the Oracle features does not have the ability to change the query itself. But if we know the original query and the new query is going to produce the same results, if Oracle provides us with the new functionality of query equivalence, we will be able to rewrite the query faster. The benefits are that quicker application rewrite. No, we don't need to modify the application internally where the code lies on. We don't need to know where the source of the SQL statement. Now we can simply store this particular functionality inside the database, which will allow you to modify the application query efficiently. Ability to modify vendor supply query, even if the query was supplied by a vendor, we can simply modify the query here, and even the vendor query executes, the Oracle database will execute the modified query by itself. It gives an option to modify the existing vendor supplied product into an open source and with a fully controlled manner. Here is a query that that will give you the same results with the source and the target database query. In this case, I am just selecting the row number and the employee ID from test1 table. I am using the where exists class to select the existence of the record in the employees table. So this is the actual number of rows and the bytes accessed and the cost involved in accessing the query. When you look at these, these are really very high because of the nature of the query which we are executing. I have the same query modified into a new version. You can see that where I have used the row class to minimize the execution uh, for until we find out the proper record here. So if you look at that, the number of bytes accessed by the query has been halved, and and the cost is reduced by a second. So basically the cost does not imply the same thing. If you execute the same query for very big queries like which takes for 8 hours or 10 hours, it may be very beneficial in actually rewriting the query and getting the results in very less time, which use of very less use of memory and execution time. I have shown the number of records in each tables and the output of each query, which are same. And what are the things now we can use, methods we can use to implement the query equivalence? One is the query equivalence, like like we use in the material view. We can use the query equivalence to store the source and say target query and execute it. We can use instead of select statement triggers. No, there is no such trigger. I just thought of having a. It would be nice to have it instead of trigger on select statement, which will help us to have more control. Like even though we don't need to modify the so many things internally for the query equivalence, instead of trigger will easily be able to implement that. And swapping cursors or passing and execution times. Using the hash values, we can swap the cursors so that the tuned query will be executed instead of the original query. So query equivalence, giving hint to Oracle that these two queries will produce same results on execution. Can store like views. we can store these SQL statements like we use and access it. Instead of trigger on select statement, create a new type of trigger to tell Oracle to execute this query instead of the original one. Instead of using full SQL statements, triggers can use SQL hash value to simplify the definition of the query. So we basically, when you're creating a trigger, nowadays instead of triggers, we'll have only one value like the table name. So if you want to use such instead of table names, we can use SQL hash values to minimize the definition of the SQL trigger, which will be helpful. And the third thing is the swapping process. Swapping SQL hash values internally by Oracle. So either of these will give us the query equivalence function. So this is what I am having in mind. So I thought let's put it in somewhere so that it can be accessed sometime later. Thank you.
As we know, each and every query has a different bind variables, and that needs not all queries doesn't have any bind variables, or most of the queries have bind variables. So it is important to map the bind variables on each and every query. So the source query and the target query needs to be bind variable mapping. So a separate tool needs to be developed in order to map the bind variables between the source query and target query. So we can look into it more in the next section.